Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar on instant readiness, observability, and learning for production teams. Today, we'll be sharing a few best practices as well as demo some solutions on how you can achieve production readiness. Before we kick off, here are a few quick housekeeping items. We highly encourage questions, and so feel free to pop those into the Q&A window at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer them in our live Q&A section at the end of the presentation. And after the webinar, we'll also be sharing this recording with you all, so feel free to share that with your team. So really excited to be with you all today. My name is Ancy. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Blameless, and I'll let Parker and Paul introduce themselves as well.
Yeah. Hi, all. My name is Parker Edwards. I am the Manager of Sales Engineering at Lightstep, and very excited to be here with the folks at Blameless today.
And hey, everyone, this is Paul Chu, Senior Sales Engineer at Blameless. Also, just as excited to show you how we have the two tools working together to help benefit your organization today.
Awesome. So here's a quick high-level agenda of what we'll be covering today. So we'll be walking through some context on why production team preparedness is both harder and more important than ever, especially as many teams are dealing right now with cutbacks in resources and infrastructure instability, as well as a lot of pressures to do more with less. We'll then walk through some top pain points for production teams, key practices to improve production excellence, as well as dive specifically into solutions to ensure that you're never caught off guard for any incident or unknown. So first, let's define what we mean by production team readiness. So essentially, it's the set of skills and practices that a team adopts in order to be confident of owning their systems in production. Achieving a production excellence matters a lot, not only for the engineers, but also for the business. It first of all allows teams to deploy faster with confidence in order to improve innovation. Teams are able to do more with less through automation and minimizing toil, and this in turn improves customer experience as well as software performance, as well as mitigates risk to the business. There's some interesting data to back this up with Enterprise Management Associates launching a survey that notes that 74% of organizations invest in DevOps in order to improve their ability to take quick action to address changing market needs. And around 50% of respondents who are respectively focused on improving application performance as well as innovation agility. But production readiness is also getting much harder than ever before for several reasons. So first of all, modern systems now must support hybrid architectures spanning multiple operating models and new architectures such as microservices. And so this really leads to an explosion of complexity and interdependencies where it's harder than ever to really observe distributed systems. This leads to several downstream impacts on the rest of the software lifecycle. So teams are slammed with data without context, creating significant cognitive load. And this is made further complicated as the costs of coordination are becoming increasingly higher across distributed and siloed teams, not to mention the rise in remote work that further complicates things. So here are, some significant challenges that we see. The result of, everything that we described on the slide before is that modern production teams are facing really unprecedented pain points. So first of all, teams are dealing with a lack of visibility and siloed data across the software lifecycle. There's low signal to noise when it comes to triaging this huge complexity and rise in volume of alerts. And this also leads to slower development productivity and velocity due to production bottlenecks as well. Postmortems also are often done as a checkbox item, leading to lost opportunities for learning. And this means that technical debt often goes unfixed, leading to continued manual toil and ad hoc work across the software lifecycle. So here are a few practices to address issues across the software lifecycle and improve production readiness. So teams will often adopt several key practices. And so these include CI/CD to automate the release pipeline and ensure that things can be deployed safely and automatically, regression testing to ensure that changes don't break existing functionality, capacity management to scale infrastructure up and down to meet demands, observability and instrumentation to get visibility into service health and performance, incident resolution, runbooks, playbooks to reduce ad hoc work and toil during incidents. And finally, last but not least, postmortems, which we also like to call incident retrospectives. So these are really crucial to ensure that you're getting the most out of your incidents and really reinvesting those learnings so that you can spend less time on repetitive things and more time on the things that matter. So quick show of hands. We thought it would be fun to do a quick poll of which of these practices is your team implementing today? Awesome. So I'll share the results. Super interesting since it looks like, majority of teams are focused on CI/CD as well as incident resolution, and postmortems, also seeing significant adoption, and also observability and capacity management rounding that out. Awesome. And we also had another quick question as well. In terms of which of these practices are you looking to invest more in 2020 so that you can get a sense of that from your peers? I'll end the poll. And here are the results from your peers. Looks like there's a lot of investment in observability in 2020, as well as investments within incident resolution and capacity management. Fantastic. So with that, I'll hand it off to Parker and Paul to dive deeper into specific challenges around operating distributed systems, and appreciate all of you sharing your insights on what you're focused on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nancy. And thanks to all of the respondents. It's very interesting to see within this group kind of where everybody's at. And I'm specifically very excited to talk more about observability. Lightstep is an observability platform that was purpose-built to solve some of the problems that Nancy mentioned a couple of slides back, specifically around deriving actual value and actual signal out of a microservices environment. And when we look at the types of architectures where this problem has become more difficult in the last couple of years, we tend to put them all into this category of what we call deep systems. If you have a microservices architecture, serverless functions, service mesh, it's not just a distributed system, but it's deep. And that depth comes in the form of dependencies. When we look at these typical architecture, which we're representing through this triangle abstraction on the screen, you can see that we have these layers, and usually those layers are independently managed. And if I'm a service owner, or if my team owns a handful of services, usually we would look at one of those layers, or maybe two of those layers. But there's a delta between what you have responsibility over and what you have control over. Your responsibility might be the performance of a service or a set of services, but what you have control over is really just those services. You don't have the ability to control the downstream dependencies or the downstream services that might be serving up information that you're using as part of your request lifecycle. And that delta, the difference between what you have responsibility over and what you have control over, introduces a lot of stress. And especially in an incident response workflow, that stress can be very detrimental to your MTTR and your MTTI metrics, as well as just developer happiness. And moving on to the next slide, you can see that when we look at the ecosystem, when we look at the tooling that's out there today, can I get to the next slide? Awesome. Those traditional tools just weren't built for deep systems. And usually those tools are built around 3 siloed data types, which you might hear as the 3 pillars of observability. Metrics on the far left are really great at understanding symptomatic behavior or identifying or quantifying the impact of particular symptoms, but they lack the context for you to be able to understand causation. That data without context, again, introduces stress that we can solve for with proper observability through Lightstep. In the middle, you have logs, which have the context that you might need to understand how different actors are contributing to one another's performance, but they're expensive, and they're still not built from a workflow perspective to provide you with the analysis that you need to understand aggregate behavior. And a lot of folks have tried to solve that lack of context with traces. But the problem in how most tools present tracing today is that it's just presenting traces in front of developers. And it's still up to those developers to identify the meaning in that data. And so Lightstep has built a better way, we believe. And on the next slide, you'll see kind of how we think about observing these deep systems. And it's really through the power of aggregate analysis. So we take all of the data types in as part of our analysis, and we aggregate them together in meaningful ways that only show you the relevant data. And I'm really excited to show this to you in the demo here in just a moment, but you can see the workflow where we start from just identifying the behavior using those metrics that are really good at showing us trends in things like latency or error rate. And then from there, we can automatically determine the root cause by taking all of the contextual data across your stack and only bubbling up to you the relevant detail for the investigation at hand. And then finally, you can take that root cause and quantify the impact. And when we're thinking about retrospectives, that ability to show that maybe another service team or another dependency owner had an impact on you takes a human element of software development and puts it front and center, which we'll showcase in Blameless. And with that, I'll hand over to Paul.
Awesome, thanks, Parker. So shifting over to Blameless, really the intent that we want to provide for our customers is around just streamlining that incident resolution process and then funneling that towards a very valuable lessons learning postmortem. Because as you can see here, I'm sure each of your companies that you're working at has some shape or form of what we're seeing here in terms of a tool stack of what you're using today to really get all that information. The issue is that, as you can see here, that it could take multiple days, weeks to make sure that whatever we're seeing, having that alert generated and having someone look at that, and then trying to triage and understand what the context of this incident is, and ultimately collaborating, gathering all that information, capturing that, and building that into a postmortem can be very cumbersome and full of toil. So what we want to do is that by leveraging a lot of the existing technologies that you're using today, we want to make sure that as you're going through and as you receive those alerts, providing a more streamlined method of saying, okay, if this happens, we want to make sure that these owners, these engineers are involved with this incident, having all the different dependencies that they would need from an incident resolution standpoint, and then having a way of gathering and capturing all that information to be tightly packaged into some sort of report and some sort of post-mortem, so that as you scale, as you grow, you have this rich repository of post-mortems that different engineers can learn from and essentially implement as they move forward to reduce these types of incidents. So as we go through into the next slide, as we go through into the Lightstep, the Blameless kind of collaboration here, what we're going to really walk through is how we can leverage the information that we're seeing from Lightstep, have it automatically generate some sort of incident within Blameless, involving at least the initial members to start the triaging of this incident, and then helping that incident resolution process by involving a lot of integrations throughout the process. So what you'll see today is that with the actual Blameless incident, we'll go ahead and show you some integrations around things that you're using today, like Slack, Jira, a paging service like PagerDuty, as well as different video conferencing solutions, to make sure that as we're going through and really gathering all this information to get to the resolution as quickly as possible, we can then ultimately extract that information and capture that information so that we can build out this rich narrative of what happened with this incident, what involvement do we have from other teams, other owners, and then building that and compiling that into a very neat and easy to understand post-mortem report. And we ultimately want to avoid that black hole you saw on the previous screen. And then basically just have that so that you can improve from an organization standpoint of reducing these types of incidents as much as we can. So at this point, I'm going to jump into the demo, and we'll walk through what it looks like from Blameless once the alert from Lightstep has been triggered. I'll walk through kind of what the initial triaging aspect looks like with some collaboration from Parker here. And then we'll jump into what Parker's seeing on his side with Lightstep, and then wrap it up with what the postmortem and the retrospective exercise looks like within Blameless. So I'm just going to share my screen. And you should be able to see my Slack app here. And what I'm showing you is that basically we've gone ahead and received that alert from Lightstep and had a incident automatically created like you see here. So the first thing that we'll look at is that based off of the different pieces of information that we understand from that alert, we'll go and automatically generate the incident here. We'll have a severity level associated, and we'll go ahead and invite some initial members. So in this case, just myself. And I've been assigned as the commander of this incident. But what you'll see here too is that I'm in my own dedicated Slack channel for this particular alert. In this way, as we start collaborating and involving other parties, they can all quickly get acclimated to what's happening with a quick summary of what's happening with this incident, but also have our video conferencing link as well as our Jira ticket in this case to really be able to capture all those follow-up action items. So if I scroll down, you'll see that this is the alert that we received from Lightstep. And from here, I can start understanding, okay, who do I want to involve? So I know Parker is the owner for this particular service. So I'm just going to go ahead and assign him a role here. And these different roles can be configured so that way you can really delineate the different responsibilities that each member will have as part of this incident. So I'm just going to go ahead and assign Parker as the engineering lead. In this way, we can really start showing you the collaboration aspect here. So as the commander, maybe a message that I wanted to say is, please provide any context that you're seeing. And this way, as we're capturing all this information within this one Slack channel, what Blameless is doing in the background is really capturing a lot of this information to start building out this timeline of what we're seeing. So in this case, this is great. We have this pulled in from Lightstep. I'm just going to highlight this message, and that way you'll see that it's automatically being captured. And I'll show you what it looks like as well in the UI. But anything that we're seeing here in terms of messages, in terms of different alerts that we're seeing, we can go ahead and capture that information by leveraging the Blameless bot that we have involved with this use case here for this incident. And that way make sure that, as we're capturing this information, having it readily available so that when you do start building up the postmortem, going through that exercise, it really allows for you to go ahead and be able to quickly transfer that knowledge from the incident and have it captured within your postmortem or incident retrospective. So as you can see here, like things like images that we're adding into the Slack channel, these will be automatically captured as a part of the integration here. So you'll see the acknowledgement reactions there. In this way, we can start going and having all these details really built into the Blameless incident record. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the UI to show you what's being captured so far. This is the incident record that we're looking at for the current incident. And this is the timeline that's been built out. So you'll see that we'll capture a lot of the major events that are occurring throughout the incident. You'll see kind of when the start of impact was. We'll see that a PagerDuty alert was triggered for this particular incident. And then all the information that we're capturing here will be all available as a part of this process. So we'll see here that this screenshot we were able to pull from Lightstep to then provide the context as well as evidence that we'd want to ultimately include within the final report. So at this point, Parker's been doing a lot of work in Lightstep in the background. Let's actually dive into Lightstep to see what Parker is seeing on his side.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I was pinged by Blameless automatically to come in. I've checked into the incident and I'm ready to debug. So obviously looking at some of the context I had available and some links that were available to me, I can see that the degradation in performance really started in our iOS app. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop over to Lightstep. And when we start ingesting data from Lightstep, so you can go check out any of our agents, just drop them into your environment, and we'll start collecting this important telemetry data. And we'll build out all the different services and all the different API endpoints or things like message queues that your applications or services might be using to communicate with one another. And we'll automatically build health metrics around those different endpoints. So in this case, I have my view of the world as the iOS app owner, and I can go down and start to look for some of that information. And I do see this update inventory call where right around the incident timeline, we have this pretty significant spike in our higher percentiles, our 95th and our 99th percentiles, going all the way up to 1.6 seconds from a norm of 273 milliseconds in our highest 99th percentile. And now, obviously, the next question I want to ask, especially in an incident, is what happened? I've validated that this behavior is not a red herring, not a red flag. So I want to know what happened and how do I fix it? And with Lightstep, all we have to do is simply click on the spike that we're interested in investigating and give Lightstep a baseline. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose 1 hour prior to this incident. And we'll take all of the telemetry data, including thousands of metric points, thousands of traces, thousands of logs, and we'll put that data together and we'll only show you what's relevant. So when we talk about making signal actually valuable and increasing the signal to noise ratio, we want to make sure that we're putting in front of you only the relevant data. So in this case, I can validate the shift in our latency histogram to the right with our 95th percentile. And there's some tags that Lightstep wants me to know about. So in Lightstep, there's a concept of tagging where we have infinite cardinality support for these with no additional cost, which means you can take any piece of attribution that might be influencing how a particular service instance is responding to a request, things like method attribution, environment variables, HTTP headers, and we can put those into the telemetry data. And in this case, all the things like user agent strings, environment data, customer data is being omitted because Lightstep has shown that there are only 2 things that were introduced in this regression window that did not exist in our baseline. We have this service version, which is interesting, so potentially tied to a deploy. So I'm starting to form a hypothesis here. And then there's this large batch equals true. And we can confirm that both of these were not present in our regression window or weren't present in our baseline window, but were introduced in our regression window. And so we can also go down and see where does that latency manifest itself in our architecture. I'm going to tell Lightstep that I'm interested in all downstream callers, so looking at my entire dependency stack, and we'll bubble up automatically the blocking time that is being spent, and we'll show you where that change occurred. And in this case, it looks like it's this write cache operation in our inventory service. And because we're using the trace data to power this analysis along with the metric data, we can understand what piece of every latency call is actually being blocked by other dependencies. So there's no guessing, is this metric important? Because Lightstep knows that contextually. And there's a lot of useful information here. I've already identified that it looks like the problem is not in my service, it's actually in another service. So I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot. And I'll go ahead and add this to my incident channel here and just say latency in inventory service. Whoops, investigating. Remembering how to spell in a live demo is always the hardest part. So from there, we can certainly pass this over to our inventory team and allow them to come in. I could tag them, but I'm gonna be a good steward. And because Lightstep makes this very easy, I'm just gonna go back to our directory here and look at that inventory service and try and answer the question, why? And already we can see that Lightstep has parsed out the version information from our services. So every time we make a deployment, no API integration necessary, we know when those new versions hit your environment, and we parse those out. And it looks like right around the time this incident started, there was a new deployment of our inventory service. And as we rolled that out, so looking at the rate as we did a rollout of this particular service build, we can see that the new version of this service had a significant increase in latency. So already, again, forming hypotheses. I'll go ahead and take this and add it into our channel as well. Huh, I've lost my cursor. Cool. So I'll go ahead and do that. And add it to our postmortem as well. Again, I can simply come in and click on this and validate using the information that it does look like there was the same information in this service that we saw in our iOS app. And we can confirm that this write cache inventory here introduced a concept of batching that seems to be relevant to this particular build. So I'm going to go back and advise a rollback of the inventory service. I'm going to make sure that this advice gets added into Blameless. So I'll just say Blameless. That message is important to me. And then finally, we'll fast forward a little bit. Going down the line a bit when we've had a moment for our inventory team to step in and issue a rollback, and we can validate that in Lightstep as well. So the new version was deployed, 1.14.402. As we have that version rolled out, we can see that that latency goes back to what we would expect. So I'll validate this with one final screenshot, and I will drop it into our postmortem. There's a thing here. And I'll just say latency back to normal levels. Post rollback, behavior resolved. And we can see as I add these screenshots, Blameless is going and taking that information. I know that it's going to be integrated back into our retrospective, but my work is done. So I'm going to go ahead and pass back to Paul to wrap up this particular incident.
Awesome. Thanks, Parker.
Definitely.
So jumping back into Blameless. So at this point, we've jumped into our postmortem. Parker's done a great job in terms of providing a lot of that context that we're seeing as a part of this incident. So if we fast forward a little bit into, what we're looking at for, this particular incident, all the information that we've captured, what we can then do is have all this information readily available so that this way I can start working on this incident post-mortem, collaborating with each other, and making sure that we have all this captured as well. So what I'll do here is we'll go into the different elements of this post-mortem. But the first thing you'll see here is that we're looking at the incident overview tab, which will contain a lot of the different questions that you can actually customize into this exercise. And what will happen here is that as we're going through, we can then understand, okay, who was impacted by this incident? How was this incident detected? So typical questions that you'd go through as kind of this post-incident meeting that you most likely conduct, especially for high severity incidents. So by having these questions in here, I can just simply come in here as we're having this discussion. Looks like customers were impacted as well as internal stakeholders. Alerting actually captured this incident, and this was due to a recent change that caused this incident. So I can go and save that just to make sure that we can include this within the final report, and then also being able to build out any sort of metrics based off these questions as well. The other piece is around our analysis section. So with all the great information that we're able to pull from Lightstep, we can then start populating this section here. So this is going to be pretty similar to what you're currently doing today, working in some sort of collaborative text editor, where we can then, within Blameless, actually preload some sort of template based off the scenario, the use case. And this way we can start leveraging the data that we have within our timeline and start populating what we're seeing here that we'd want to ultimately include within our final report. So you'll see here that I was able to pull in some of the captured messages that we had within the timeline, all those screenshots. And the idea is that we just want to quickly transition from incident to postmortem while everything is fresh in everyone's mind. And by kind of reducing that barrier to entry when it comes to building these postmortems, that's really where this timeline will come into a huge value point for a lot of organizations, and currently with our customers, of course. So we've gone ahead and added a lot of this information. We have a lot of good context to make sure that we provide all the details for this narrative. So at this point, I want to go ahead and start bringing some other people to review. So in this case, I'm just going to ping myself, but what you can also do here is that by adding comments as a part of this review process, we can then bring in different members of the organization, of the management team, to make sure that we get an additional set of eyes on this. Then I'll just say something like, please review first draft. And this will then kick off that whole process. So from there, what will happen is once you mention a user, if we go back to our Slack channel here, you'll see that comment pop up, only visible to the user who this message was sent to. I can quickly access that postmortem and then continue on with approving or rejecting this particular postmortem. So at this point, once you've gone to a state where the entire team is happy and you've contained a lot of the information for this particular incident, we can then move this to published, which will then archive the Slack channel, take it off your radar, and then queue this report up to be delivered on a specified delivery date that you have set up within Blameless to make sure that these postmortems are delivered to various members of the organization. So to kind of zoom out a little bit, as we go through multiple incidents, you'll see that we can then provide some information here around what we're seeing with different metrics, that we want to capture as a part of, being able to flow the incidents through Blameless. So an example here is like the standard MTT type of metrics. So the benefit is that by having all this information funneling through Blameless, we can then have a lot of these different metrics captured to not only give the team and the organization some understanding of how the team is performing, but also a way to make sure that any bottlenecks that we identify, we can quickly address them, whenever we do review our incident resolution process as we're going through. So at this point, we'll hop back into the slides here. And from here, we will kind of wrap up and go into Q&A. So just to recap, what we've shown you today is we've shown the alert coming from Lightstep, automatically being sent to Blameless. And from here, what we're able to do is just help streamline that entire process, leveraging Lightstep's abilities to make sure that we quickly understand the details around the alert, what type of behavior we're seeing, within the different dashboards, and then helping users by guiding them through a process, having that sort of foundation when dealing with these incidents. But this way, we want to basically provide that visibility end to end. We want to reduce that time it takes to actually resolving the incidents, then ultimately capturing all that information within these postmortems to really eliminate that bottleneck of tribal knowledge. So I'll let Parker kind of chime in with his 2 cents here, but that's essentially the review of what we've seen today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul. Obviously, we're very excited about our partnership and our integration, and this really represents kind of the first of many subsequent steps to really increase the things that Paul referenced. Obviously, Lightstep is built for that end-to-end visibility and helping to reduce metrics like MTTA, MTTR, MTTI, and also eliminating tribal knowledge around just making sure that, that you're not siloed within your particular service boundaries, that you can understand the dependencies that you're dependent on. And we also know that there are some things that might run a little bit counter to the industry held beliefs today to make this process easier and more valuable with this integration. And the first is to use high cardinality tags in your instrumentation. Now, especially I know that with a lot of metrics vendors, high cardinality tags are very expensive. So in general, engineers steer clear of adding that level of granularity into their telemetry data. But with Lightstep, there's no additional cost. And so you can take things, as mentioned earlier, environment variables, method attribution, HTTP headers, add them to your data so that not only are they indexed and searchable, you can go in and understand the performance for a particular customer or a particular build or container ID and start to facet from there. But Lightstep will also incorporate that data into our correlations analysis. So if you don't want to go and search for all of these tag values that might have millions or billions of unique values in the system, you can just let Lightstep do that heavy lifting for you. And you can also incorporate that data to build programmatic links into other tools using our workflow links. So obviously, we're pretty proud of the work we do at Lightstep, and we're very happy to be working with Blameless, who also does great work, but we know that there are other tools in a developer's tool belt. And we want to make sure that we meet those developers where they're at. So leverage the data that might exist in other tools, that metadata that could be in perhaps a build system or a code source or source code repository, and allow Lightstep to build you a bridge from your incident view, from your observability view into those other tools to make a more cohesive workflow. And I'll pass back to Paul to cover the last point.
Yep. And then ultimately, having all that valuable information funneling through some sort of streamlined process like Blameless to make sure that, as you're going through, we want to reduce as much of that cognitive load as we can by just making it very easy and understandable, providing those guardrails for the responders to understand, okay, these are my responsibilities, and then ultimately make sure you capture all that data for a very valuable narrative within your postmortem.
Awesome. So with respect to next steps, our teams are really excited to share additional resources following this webinar, and do highly encourage you to check out the respective links that we've shared here for more product details on Blameless as well as Lightstep. Our teams also are actively working on workflow documentation and a learning path that will guide you through how to set up the integration for best practice instant response, and are really looking forward to launching that very soon. And both of our teams respectively also do offer free sandbox environments for you to play around with the solutions live. And of course, we're also more than happy to chat live and work actively with you to set you up for success. So feel free to reach out directly to Paul and Parker as well. We're here to help in any way. And with that, we do have a couple of questions that are coming in. So looking forward to using the rest of this time to answer those live. So our first question that we've gotten is, does Blameless do the same integration with Microsoft Teams, or is it mainly built on Slack?
Yeah, it's a great question. So currently it's built on Slack, but we are currently in the process of building out parity with Microsoft Teams. So it's coming soon, probably within the next quarter or so, but we'd be happy to show you some kind of mock-ups and what that would look like as well.
Excellent. Another question, does the analysis have templates available to make it easier to fill in the blocks?
So the analysis section within the postmortem is really up to you. We will have a default template in there for you, but we also have great SRE resources in-house at Blameless to not only help with the deployment, but also to help in terms of providing consultation around what are we seeing in a lot of our customer organizations, what are we seeing as industry trends. So we have both approaches to help you make sure that you contain or capture all the different sections within those templates.
And one other thing to note as well is there's a capability called custom questions that also allows teams to get more of a 365 view. And those do have templates in terms of types of questions that you can ask your team if they don't have the time to go extremely deep with the narrative, but are able to provide more of a lens into things like observability or how different processes were set up as it relates to the incident process. We also have another question that came in regarding the typical time to value and process setup around both of these solutions.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a crack at the Lightstep side. The interesting thing, obviously we're looking at technology on both sides that are really built for organization-wide scale and whatever size organization you work at. The transformative value that you can look at when these tools are deployed across the entire organization is obviously immense, but that type of change doesn't happen overnight, at least with Lightstep. And the really cool thing is that you can get a lot of valuable data just by deploying Lightstep within your own services that you own. So when we think about time to value, our goal is to get valuable data into the system in less than 30 minutes. So we've got agents that you can go download, start a free trial, or reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you out with this. Deploy our agents within your environment and start getting the data to understand how the different facets of your service depend on one another. And start to really, through organic adoption, showcase that to other teams and allow those teams a chance to adopt the same technology and gradually build towards the type of transformative organization-wide change. But in terms of time to value, our goal is less than 30 minutes for any individual team that might jump into try out Lightstep.
Yeah, and Blameless, just on a quick note, it's really because we're there to help augment the existing engineering teams and resources. The integrations will take, no more than 10 minutes to set up. But in terms of the process and the codifying of the layouts of how we would want to have the automation trigger and everything, that's going to be something that we'll collaborate with your side, with our customer success team, to make sure that you are set up for success when incidents do occur within Blameless.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If there are additional questions at this time, feel free to enter those into the Q&A window here. We'll stay on to continue answering them. But again, we're so excited about this partnership to be able to serve better serve our customers and prospects like yourselves, and looking forward to sharing all of the resources that we mentioned with you all very shortly as well.